and welcome back to Living Soil Garden. We're going to do a tour of the garden today. It's the 20th of August and there's been a relatively long drought, at least 6 weeks without any rain here in the southwest of England, and that has implied a lot of problems for people who don't have irrigation and for fields and animals out on pasture. Fortunately we have a borehole, so we were able to irrigate our young transplants, as you'll see in a minute, when we needed to. But nevertheless, it's been, it was really hot with temperatures arriving at 31-32 degrees, and so some plants really struggled. Now we had a little bit of rain, some heavy rain actually, 2 days in a row, and it's dry again today, but the temperatures are a lot lower, in the region of 20 to 25 degrees. So before we start, I wanted to mention that we now have a Telegram channel, and I'm going to put the link down in the description of this video, and on there you can find short videos about anything that happens in the garden, short updates, but especially what's been popular are short video about tips on different topics, from pest control to how to transplant, how to interplant and things like that. Okay, let's get going. I'm going to turn the camera around and you'll see the garden in this month, which is relatively warm but also very, very abundant. Here we go. So here we are in what we call row C. And before we get going and have a look at these vegetable beds, I wanted to show you how beautiful the flower beds are in this at this time of the year. There's so much diversity of colors and textures and heights, and it's a really good environment for wildlife as well. Some self-seeded vegetables as well in there, which add color and diversity, and so Flavia's been managing these beds really well this year with a lot of interplanting of perennials and annuals, some seed saving crops like calendula over there, and also some parsley here, and so these add a lot of pollinator friendly habitat, as well as acting as an attractor to people because they look really beautiful. Okay, our vegetable beds, I wanted to start with the what I call the syntropic beds, so the high density beds I should call them. These beds, just as a quick reminder, are interplanted with a variety of vegetables, high diversity but high density as well. So everything is planted in a very close spacing. You can see some beetroots, you can see the fennel there, you can see more beetroot, and as we go there's some lettuce, there's some carrots, you just about see in the middle there, and then we've added some radishes and more lettuce, and then we've added in some endive and some baby kale, and there are some onions, and there are some French beans which have been producing nicely. You can see here some of the beans that actually needed to be picked a few days ago. They're getting a little bit too big, and then some lovely onions. There we go. The idea here is that there are a mixture of plants, some of which, like these endive on the side, on the side here, and the lettuce and the spinach down there, that get cut on a regular basis. And then there are some long-term crops like the carrots and the fennel and the broccoli there, which get cut, which produce on a long-term basis and therefore don't get pruned. But they benefit from the light and the root microbiological stimulation that gets given by the more regularly harvested crops like the baby kale, the lettuce, the spinach, etc. And here we've got a similar setup with lots and lots of diversity in these beds. We've got some kale, some parsley, some fennel, some cauliflower, a bit of calendula, and then we've got more broccoli. And first year of we've been growing this for the first year. It's a variety of squash called the Moro F1, which produces winter squash, but on a bushy plant rather than on a trailing one. It still tends to trail. I see this kind of side branch which wants to trail. I think we're going to cut it to avoid that happening. But it's relatively bushy, more like a courgette than a winter squash. So there's some French beans here, some new planting of those, and then the third bed here, there's a lot more summer purslane, a lovely salad green, and then we've got some parsley, some broccoli that have been cut already once, You can see down the middle there they've been cut and they're producing some lovely sized shoots. More broccoli, and then we put some mustards in and some chard, more purslane, cavallonero, spring onions, and so on and so forth. Lots of some more squash, beautiful lettuce down there around the back. And this is the high diversity syntropic beds. And if you follow us on Telegram, I do often videos on those to update on how things are going in these beds and how we're harvesting, how we are pruning and managing them. They're quite relevant to people who have got small gardens, because you know, you've seen there's such a high density and diversity of crops that you can easily fit a lot of food in a very small space with this technique. Okay, let's go into our production beds, and I'm going to be fast today because I don't want to do a very long video. Some of you have commented on the fact that these videos might be a bit too long sometimes to watch, and you know, I understand people are time poor, so I'm going to be as quick as I can. These are lettuce beds. Now these lettuces have come to an end really. We will be picking them for one last time this week, and probably another week after that, just in case we need it. And you can see some of them are going to flower. Some of them have really suffered from the heat, and then we've pulled up quite a lot, and we've already replaced some of them with this bed here, which is an interplanting of chard and endive and lettuce. So you can see in this pattern we've got the chard and then the lettuce and the endive or endive, whatever you want to call it. And this is a beautiful looking pattern, but also a nice combination. They work really well together. And there's some more lettuce in that bed there, and that again is lettuce that it's all been harvested for the last time very soon. I'm going to go to this side because there's the irrigation is on for some young transplants, and you'll see it in a minute. So some fennel here. This is a interplanting combination that we tried last year, and it worked really well. Fennel with lettuce on the side. So fennel in the middle as a long-term crop, and lettuce that gets harvested every week on the outer rows. Here we've got a completely different actually interplanting of Swiss chard and mustards down the middle. So 2 rows of Swiss chard and 1 row of mustard down the middle. And here we go. So then we got some more lettuce. Again, this is a succession of lettuce that is coming to an end. I'm gonna stay on this side actually. Perpetual spinach, we've been cutting these quite a lot. You can see the ones that have been harvested this week doing fairly well, and the ones that have recovered already done there. And then there's an extra succession coming in here. They've been planted a few days ago, and they've been watered by this system called Regulflow. Hopefully you can see, despite the light, the system. There's a tape down the middle of this bed, and you can move it. It's relatively light, very light actually when it's not in operation. And then it swells up with water, and it's got holes on either side, and it sprays this very fine, almost mist-like jet of water that breaks down into droplets and simulates the rain. And it does give a lovely cooling down effect, as well as obviously watering the plants. And here we've got some baby kale down the middle with Swiss chard on the side. Sorry, my shadow's in the way. I'm just going to now go to the other side so you don't get that effect. So here we've got some courgettes. Now this struggled a lot because of powdery mildew. When it gets very dry, the leaves tend to sweat more. Sweat is not the right word. They transpire, and they get condensation on the lower leaves, especially at night, and that tends to create powdery mildew like the one that you're seeing on these leaves. And the solution in our case, obviously they slow down their production anyway after they get older. So you see each courgette plant has become quite big and keeps producing at the tip, and at the tip there's still flowers and fruits happening. What we do is we remove all the white leaves, we spray with a solution of liquid soap that we make here from scratch, and then we add a little bit of liquid sulfur that can be that's totally natural and harvested from rocks. And you know, we've never had to do it before, but this year we had to do it because there was a lot of powdery mildew. So we removed the leaves and sprayed the young ones with this natural solution, and they've been doing fine. That acts also as a sulfur fertilizer, which improves the quality of the fruits. Then we've got some Cavallonera at the back there, doing very well. Very little to say about that. We've got here some Fildenkrauts cabbages, very beautiful cabbage variety, very dense. They can get very big, but we planted them very close because we don't want huge cabbages for sauerkraut. We want them for vegetable boxes, and so the smaller the better, really. But they're very dense, very big, so people get a lot of value for the money because they're paying for one cabbage, but they're getting a few kilos sometimes. So let's have a look on this side. Here we've got, under the net, you can barely see, some radishes, 6 rows of radishes in a 75 centimeter wide bed. Here we've got some fennel. Now this is some fennel. Yeah, they've been doing really well, the fennels, despite the heat, because we water them initially, established them really well when they were very young, and now these varieties, Mantovano and Rondo, have done very well. Now you can see when they go to flower, they tend to have that elongated shape, but when they don't, let me show you, like this guy already, and this one is still far from flowering, and unless it's very, very hot and dry, in 2 or 3 weeks it might flower. But if it's not, actually, if it stays as it is, it will keep for more than that. But we're aiming to harvest these within 3 weeks, and we've got loads. There's at least 200 fennels in here. Some of them are really big, like the one you saw a minute ago, like this guy, for example, here. And there's a variety of sizes, and there's two varieties in terms of the crop. There's a Mantovano and Rondo. The first one is open pollinated, the second is a hybrid F1. Okay, so this is radish that's going to come out soon. We leave the flowers to encourage pollinators, but especially parasitoid wasps, and I've got a video about that on Telegram, but also I've been discussing this in previous video tours. Essentially, they allow us not to use any netting apart from the one we use for pigeons, and sometimes sweet midge. We don't use netting for cabbage butterflies as such, because they're not a problem. They get parasitized very heavily by Cotesia glomerata and other parasitoid wasps. Here you can see an interplanting of leeks and beetroot. So the leeks are multi-sown, so several per bunch, and then you get the beetroots in there. And it looks really beautiful. Look at the health of those leaves. Look at how beautiful the leaves look. I'm really finding my shadow annoying, so I'm going to turn around and look to the other side. Here we go. So yeah, as you can tell, the beetroots are doing really well, and the leeks are also growing nicely. There's some red cabbage under here. There's some white cabbage under here, with an interplanting of beetroots down the middle. And this again is a mixture of white cabbage and red cabbage. And these guys are without netting because we've got an ultrasound repellent there for the birds. What happens essentially is there are some cables there, some power lines, and the pigeons perch on there, and then they they eat our cabbage leaves. So what we've done is we put ultrasound and netting. Both systems work relatively well, even though the ultrasound in time doesn't work as well, because they learn that it's safe to actually go and eat. So there's some winter cabbage here, mostly watermelon, red meat, radish, which is beautiful. Look, it's got pink flesh and a white greenish peel skin. And here there are some moody radishes that have just been sown with the jank, so direct seeded. And in here there's some rocket. We need to water these guys a little bit. Here you can see the in this last bed before the willow, you can see the beetroots, and some of them are growing a bit slower because of the competition of the willows. We prune these, but really to avoid competition we should prune them really heavily, at least 3 times a year. But we don't want to do that too much, because very soon there might be storms, and the wind from that direction, which is south, can be quite severe, so having protection is also a bonus. You can see that the willows have got aphids on them, and the aphids produce this honeydew that the wasps love. And so if I shut up for a minute, you'll hear a buzz, and probably you can already see lots of wasps in there. All right, so this is the first row of beds. Then we can go along here. We've got some broccoli, and they're looking really good. They really need picking actually. They will need picking now. The problem with broccoli, I find with Calabrese broccoli, is that if you don't pick them now, already in 3 or 4 days they might start to spoil and change colour a little bit and not look as nice, not sell as well. And that's a shame because we're going to harvest them. We need to harvest them to put them in boxes next Thursday or Friday. Today is a Saturday. So what do? Do we harvest them now and then put them in boxes a few days later, or do we wait and risk that they get a little bit spoiled? There is a bit of a dilemma there. Anyway, when they get harvested like this, then they produce side shoots like you saw in the beds at the top, the ones with high density. Okay, so this is another interplanting that I'm quite happy with how it's gone. Red cabbages. Oh, look at these guys. Really lovely, ready almost. Well, some of them are ready actually. And then some parsnips and carrots down the middle. And the carrots are looking good. I mean, the ground is dry, so I would have a hard time. Ooh, there's been some rodent damage there. Oh no, slug damage. Hopefully you can see where I'm looking at. Let's try and pull a carrot. Yeah. Oh, lovely carrot. This was the youngest one in that bunch, but looking good, and they've been tasting fantastic, these carrots. So it's been a success despite having to sow them 2 times, but it's been better than last year. And this is to do not the slug damage. The slug damage is what causes us to have to sow them repeatedly. And here we've got some broccoli, a sea of broccoli, different types of purple sprouts, and also some green Calabrese broccoli. And I'm going to show you some damage that you can get from sweet midge. Sweet midge is a very, very damaging, harmful, pestiferous, I don't know if that's a word, insect, and it doesn't have many natural predators, so it's difficult to control it just by encouraging biodiversity. I can't see a lot of damage. I've removed some plants last week. Yeah, perhaps here you can see a little bit. We'll get towards the top of these beds and you'll see what I mean. Yeah, it starts like that. I'm going to remove that leaf. It starts like this, so the leaves essentially show some distortion, and then after that's become a problem, after that starts to become more serious, then you get the rotting of the whole plant tip, and that is quite severe. You lose entire plants very fast. Anyway, we're managing to control it with removing the plants that get affected and throwing them away from the garden, essentially in the green waste bin. And then also we sprayed a little bit of neem oil, which is a natural oil from a plant that grows in subtropical climates, and only once, and it seems to have done the job, but perhaps that really wasn't why they've stopped being so harmful. And there's another fly there. Look at that. Anyway, I'm slowing down, so let me just pick up a bit more pace. Here we've got some curly kale. Under this netting there are some beautiful mustard leaves, and here we've got some curly kale. Again, I'm in the wrong place in terms of shadows. Here we got some curly kale, beautiful green curly kale. Look at these guys, they're really looking nice. And then we've got some a new succession of cavallonero, and then as we go, we got more broccoli, a bed of beetroots that's going to disappear soon, and then on this side new successions of kale, a mixture of red curly and green curly. Under here we got some pak choys. You want to see some pak choys. I hate this time of the year when flea beetle is still strong, and so we have to cover the Asian greens. Hopefully you can see under there. I'm struggling to see what you guys see. Anyway, there's some beautiful pak choys in there. A little bit of slight damage, but not too much. And then there's on this side the leeks, red cabbages, leeks, and a new succession of fennel, some Asian greens under the net there, different types of Asian greens. And here there's a parsley, flat leaf parsley, some coriander, and some curly leaf parsley. More Leeks, these dark green ones are called Bandit, a variety that that matures quite late. That would be like, you know, December onwards. You can harvest them a bit smaller in November, but usually they're more for the new year, and even up to April in the new year, in the next season. Whereas these guys, which have got lighter color, especially these ones, are very fast growing, and they're called Bulgarian. And you can see they've got lighter color, but they're already quite big, and they'll be ready to harvest as a medium-sized leek in September. And then here you can see what's happened to the peas. We're letting them dry, then we remove them, and we've done that process, removing also the posts for all these beds that you see in front of you. There are beetroots remaining in the beds because there was a row of peas down the middle, actually 2 rows on either side of the trellis, and then there were 2 rows of beetroots, and now the rows of beetroots are still in place and still producing, whereas the peas have gone. And very soon we'll lift all of the beetroots in some of these beds and replace them with something else. And here we got some celery, a crop that struggled a lot with the heat, so it doesn't taste as sweet, and it's not as tender as it could be, because celery is one of the thirstiest crops in the world. It does need a lot of water. Have a look. It does look pretty though, so we've been selling it all right, but unless it starts raining more, it won't be as nice as it was last year. And we've got a variety, that yellowing there is from a variety called Full White from Real Seeds. This green one is Victoria, very popular hybrid celery. And then we've got some purple celery as well. Here we've got some more red cabbages, looking nice. Down the middle here, well, between the leeks on the left hand side and the red cabbages, we had some black oats. You might have seen some videos where I talked about green manures, and we had black oats, and you can see the residue of the crop was put in the compost, but the stalks remained in here, and the roots as well, obviously. And the soil here is so soft, it's a marvel to put your hands in there. And so we transplanted straight into it without even broad forking. And actually I think I broad forked one and not the other, so the one on the right has been broad forked, the one on the left hasn't, but that's not the reason for those being bigger. They were transplanted 1 week or 2 weeks earlier, I can't remember now. These are Chinese leaf with chard down the middle, rainbow chard, to trial it as an interplanting. I don't know how it will go, because the Chinese leaf might suffocate the chard a little bit. As you can see here, they're already growing quite wide, and the chard in the middle, I think this will blanch the chard and produce some nice stalks, but it might go wrong, and so that's why we didn't do that on the right hand side, to compare them next to each other. And this one is just 3 rows of straight Chinese leaf. That's what we've always done, and it works really well, but I wanted to trial more interplanting of Chinese leaf, because it's one of those crops that we can grow without netting, so it's good to interplant it. So more red cabbages maturing, ripening, getting ready. And here we got some Romanesco broccoli, or cauliflower, or Cavolo Romanesco, fractal looking beauty. And more of those along this row and this row here. And on this side we've got some chicories of different types. We've got some radicchio heads. These are red radicchios, 5060T I think is the variety, and some Treviso varieties as well, and then some endives or endives or endives. You tell me how you pronounce it. Everybody I ask pronounces it in a different way. These are really good to cook with, but a lot of people see them as a salad green and then they're disappointed because they're very, very bitter. We add them to salad mixes, but in very small amounts, because they can be really bitter. This is a type of chicory that's very popular in Italy, called puntarelle or Catalonia, very popular in Rome. You just you wilt it in a pan, add some garlic and some oil. Well, first you put oil, then garlic, and then you add these, wilt them, and then they're really nice as a side dish to meat, fish, or even a vegetarian main meal. In here there's some more pak choys. They're struggling with the heat at the moment, actually. We have to water these, and they're still a bit too young. You might not be able to see through the net, but some of them are a bit wilted. And here we've planted some, I'll just in front of myself, look at that. And we've got some wild rocket, which is really, really hot and nice to add to salads. And hopefully now in the distance you can see that spray. It's a bit windy today, so it doesn't really work as effectively as it could, but we don't mind actually. We put it in a position where it can water the beds we want despite the wind. And here we got some baby kale, and this is the time where I can show you, this is the place where I can show you what sweet midge does. So you saw that it distorts the leaves of the plants, and then here you can see if you let it go to the next stage, it eats essentially into the stem, it burrows into the stem, and the whole plant rots, and then you lose the whole crop, and it stinks really. So it's easy to tell that that's happening because it starts to stink. And just as a comparison, you see a normal leaf, yeah, so these have all got it now. You see a distortion there, and if you know, yeah, you can see it here as well, and it's really ugly and smelly. It's not the best, but red Russian kale is one of the most susceptible crops, so we're going to net it from now on. And it always happens in the late summer and early autumn. We seem to have sweet midge, but you know, broccoli, which are the ones that are difficult to net, seem to be okay. They get a bit of damage, where we lose 10 to 15% of the plants maximum, so we don't mind too much. But kale is easy to net, so we can do that from now on, just for this time of the year. And then here we've got an interplanting of French beans, dwarf French beans, the latest and the last succession. They're flowering now. And then we've got carrots down the middle. We've been harvesting a lot of baby carrots from this bed. Really good interplanting, baby carrots, or you know, any type of carrots really, and French beans on the side. This on the right hand side here is chard with endive or endive on the sides, interplanted with some lettuce as well. So you see again lettuce, endive and chard, which is something that we've been trialing this year. And this is again French beans, 2 rows of French beans, the last succession of the year, flowering now, producing in 2 weeks probably. And we have got some beetroots down the center. So again, normally in biointensive planting, people don't interplant beans. They only have 2 rows of beans per bed, and that's it. We usually put something down the middle. We do it with leeks. We do it with interplant them with carrots and beetroots. And here you can see it with leeks down the middle. You see that? These are beans that were planted a lot earlier. They're producing now. So that's the one before last, the succession before the last. And there's some leeks down the middle. Hopefully you can see. This is quite a nice cover. It covers the soil really well, and the leeks get blanched by the action, the shading effect of the beans, and everything works nicely. And here we've got some runner beans. Oh gosh, they've been producing like crazy. I bet many of you have got that problem. We've been picking them every 2 or 3 days, and we fill a bucket with them. So this is a whole bed, apart from this last plant actually, which is Borlotti, just because we had a hole there and we didn't have enough runner bean plants. The white flowering one, and you see some white flowers there at the top, is called White Lady, and the red flowering one is called Lady Di. They're both relatively stringless, and that's why we grow them. Runner beans are a staple crop almost in the UK. Many people love them, and so we grow quite a few of them. And on this side we have some carrots. I'm not going to go in there and pick a carrot, but we've been harvesting a lot of long, satisfyingly long and very tasty carrots. Actually, let's do it having said that. One of my favorite varieties is Touchon, which is a French variety. I might not be able to pull it without a fork because it's been very dry, but let me try. Okay, that's good. You can see because it's got that red tip there, and this is a medium size, it's quite a smallish one. Some of them are really huge. I'm not going to go in there, but we've been harvesting some huge carrots, which is not necessarily ideal. I prefer smaller carrots. They taste they taste as good actually if they're freshly picked, but they've got a better texture when they're smaller. So this is a nice sized carrot, and that's the second snack that I've earned during this tour. And let's have a look. So we got, you can get a feel for these carrots that were planted actually later than those. Yeah, they're getting quite big now. If I were to pull that, it would be quite a beast. And then on the left hand side you can see some Chinese leaf, and we've got scarlet pink variety, which goes really a bright pink, almost phosphorescent. It's a beautiful color. And then a normal green, white variety, green/white variety of Chinese leaf or Chinese cabbage, how you want to call it. And down the middle here we had a cover crop, and some seeds hadn't germinated earlier, and then we we removed the cover crop and planted a Chinese leaf. And in that cover crop there was fenugreek, phacelia and buckwheat, and this is buckwheat, a beautiful plant. It produces also grain if you let it go to full size and harvest it, a grain which has no gluten, but usually it's used in our small scale context as a green manure because it's really good at storing phosphorus in its leaves, fetching it around the soil and putting it in its leaves, and then when you put it on the surface or in your compost, it adds a lot of phosphorus as well. But also it looks really pretty and it attracts pollinators, and it's a good one at suppressing weeds as well if you have it very densely planted. Obviously these seeds germinated in the dry conditions that we had. They like hot and dry climate. They're a dry climate crop, and therefore we'll let them grow in between this Chinese leaf because there's no competition going on there, and they look quite pretty, don't they? Okay, so here we've got some more cauliflowers and romanesco. I'm not going to spend too much time on those. And here this is again the interplanting that we like a lot. It looks also quite pretty when they're all nicely a bit more established and grown a bit bigger. And this is fennel and lettuce, and the chard at the back is growing nicely with a backdrop of borlotti beans, which are ready to harvest as fresh beans, not dry yet obviously, but as fresh beans, fresh borlotti beans that you can use in pasta or in soups. Beautiful texture, amazing taste, and we'll soon be adding those to our boxes. Look at these guys, and selling them at the market. There's nothing better than a nice pasta and fagioli with this, so I can't wait this week to have some of that. This trellis has got a bit wonky, but it's fine. It's actually not joining in the middle, it's just moving a little bit. Okay, so here we got back to the start. French beans interplanted with beetroots, and these are the high density beds. And I think I've shown you most things. We're going to go in the tunnel in a second where Flavia is feeding with some comfrey tea and water soluble calcium our tomatoes and aubergines. This is comfrey, was cut once 3 weeks ago I think, and it's grown back really leafy, beautiful stuff. We can use this as a mulch, as a compost ingredient, or to make liquid feed like the one that Flavia is using in the garden. And we've been mulching a lot with our own unfinished compost. Actually, this is not very mature, it's still very woody, but we add a little bit of chicken manure pellets when we have a situation like this to compensate for the nitrogen that gets robbed in the decomposition of the wood, and then this gets released anyway in later seasons, and it provides a very good mulch, better than straight black compost, because it reflects more light and it stores more moisture. It's got lighter color, which means it doesn't heat up as quickly. And so Flavia has been prepping these beds for more flowers. You can see here the effects of the drought, big cracking in some areas where we haven't been growing crops for a long time. What I mean actually is not that we haven't got a crop in here. We always had a crop, and now it's just been removed to be replaced with something else. But these beds are relatively new, so we've had them only for 1 year, and therefore the soil hasn't improved yet as much as it could. Here are the perennial beds. We've got some topinambur or Jerusalem artichokes or sunchokes, tontondine kale, strawberries, lovage. These guys, we've got to remove them now. They're like an Italian variety of kale, not perennial. That one is Chinese artichoke. Then we've got some oca de Peru, and so we've got tons of things in here. A self-seeded chard doing really well, some beetroots, some rhubarb doing nicely, growing quite big now again, second flush after the rain. And sweet corn, oh gosh, sweet corn has been really good. I'm not sure if we can find some ripe ones. I'm going to try and open one up just for your benefit. Let's see, with one hand it's quite difficult. They're looking nice on there, look at that. Yeah, I'm not going to spoil it all, but you can see it's nice and ripe to the top, and you can tell by the looks of that top female flower, and the size of the cobs as well. So when they go really brown, so this one isn't quite there yet, whereas these guys are really brown, and so it's a matter of checking the tip if it's all pollinated or not. This is the flower of a leek, beautiful, attracts lots of insects as well. And on this side we've got New Zealand spinach. There you go, lovely. So let's go into the tunnel now. Here we go, so we're in the tunnel now. Lots of tomatoes, lots of basil, as you can tell. And we've had very good year for tomatoes because it's been relatively hot and dry. I always say relatively, but it's been absolutely dry and absolutely hot actually. And these plants have produced like crazy. Some of them just struggling now to stop. So what we're going to do is top them, pinch off the top before they get too high, and touch the skin of the tunnel at the top. And we've harvested these yesterday, so there aren't many ripe that you can see, so it does look a little bit empty in a way, or lots of green tomatoes, but they've been producing masses and masses and masses of tomatoes. Different varieties here. There's some Sungold, the orange ones, there's some Apero, the F1 red ones, and there's some yellow submarine, which is the yellow ones that you see over here. There we go, yellow submarine. And then, hello Roger, you're not a tomato, are you? You're a bit tired. And then there's some Brandy Boy and Marmande, two lovely varieties of beef tomatoes. We've been harvesting loads of those this year, and look at the size of them. Now this is my hand, it's nearly bigger than my hand. And some of these have been defoliated a bit more because there was a little bit of a start of late blight, but it's controllable if you take it in time. You just remove all the diseased leaves, and you can spray with a solution of water and baking soda, and usually that slows things down. The spores don't mix up too much. You have to be careful not to handle diseased material and then touch plants that are healthy, that sort of thing, but you can keep on top of it. I wanted to show you these peppers, sweet peppers, ripening now. And then some aubergines. First year we grew aubergines. We planted them way too late because there was a bit of a misunderstanding with the nursery where we got the grafted plants from. But they're growing nicely now. We'll have a lot less than we could have had because they weren't ready to crop when the season was hot. And so now essentially light is diminishing every day, but look, lovely size. And these are lovely plants. They're grafted plants, so they produce a lot better than if we started those from seeds ourselves. Lovely. So I think I'm going to turn the camera around. Oh, actually, there's one last thing I'm going to do. So I'm going to show you one last thing before we finish, and this is behind me, and it's the Two Sister bed. So this Two Sisters bed has been going really well. Lots of sweet corn in the middle section there. Now the bed ended where the last sweet corn is, but obviously these winter squash have expanded quite a lot, and we've had a lot of squash. There's a lot that we haven't seen yet. We haven't harvested any of them yet. They're not ready to be storable, so we'll let them mature as much as we can. When all the foliage starts to rot, to die down, and it's already starting to there, we'll check at the fruit, and when this part here looks hard and dry, it means that there's not a lot of flow moisture into the plant, and so you can cut it and it will store a lot longer. These orange ones are uchikikuri, and they store for a very long time. The green one is Ute Indian from Real Seeds, and they are supposed to taste amazing. I can't wait to try those. And then there's some kabocha in the middle, which is an F1, and anyway, there's loads of squash in there as well. These beds were heavily compacted. We've added a lot of our own homemade compost, and we planted those squash in, and they've done amazingly well. And so this is it. I'm going to show you one last thing. On the other side of the fence, you've seen this probably in our previous tours. This is a new area that we started last year. Flavia planted a lot of medicinal plants at the back there. They look really gorgeous now, really big, producing flowers. And here we put some more winter squash to cover this area. And look at that bumble. Is it a bumblebee or a bee? No, it's just a honeybee and a bumble. Oh, two of them in there. Can you see them? Doing their job, pollinating our squash. It's too late now for that fruit to become a squash. Actually, that's a male flower anyway. But there's already some fruit all around the place, maturing nicely. Look at the size of that one at the back. Different varieties again, Ute, Yuchikikuri, which seem to have been the ones that did better this year, but there's some kabocha. And then my favorite one, here there's some more courgette, or some squash. More medicinals down there. And this, have a look at this. This is our original soil. If we grew in soil and rotivated it and left it to dry during the drought we've had, this is what our vegetables would be growing into. Now if you can go look at our videos in the past, these are new beds, so they're still cracked open, but these plants are definitely growing in much softer soil because it's been protected by their foliage, the compost, very thick layer of compost. Initially there was some cardboard as well, which now will have rotted down, and then underneath there's the clay. But when the clay is underneath all those layers, it doesn't look like this. It will look nice and soft and moist, and therefore these plants can get all the nutrients they need and all the moisture they need despite the drought from that clay over there. And over here we've got, as I was saying, apart from having this huge Ute squash, we've got some of our favorite ones. Definitely my favorite one, both for shape and taste and texture. It's called Autumn Crown. It's an F1 again, but it's a really nice squash. It's like a butternut there we go, still immature because butternut squash take a very long time to ripen. It looks like it feels and tastes like a butternut, but it looks like a normal mini pumpkin. And I think I'm going to turn the camera around. And I think that with that squash we can finish this tour. I hope you've enjoyed following me around the garden. It's the time of the year where we're really tired and there's a lot of work going on, but we're really satisfied, and it's really beautiful to be out in the garden and seeing the abundance. It's the turn of the season as well. A lot of autumn and winter crops are going into the ground, and a lot of summer ones are slowing down and starting to come out. And so there's a new season ahead of us, full of autumn leaves and beautiful salads, winter brassicas, Asian greens and things, and radicchios and chicories and things that don't grow well in spring and summer, and we look forward to those as well. So I hope you enjoyed it, and please consider following us on Telegram if you're interested in shorter format videos and tips, and following on updates and things like that. And I look forward to seeing you in the next video tour, which will be in September. Bye for now.